Hello my dear YouTuber friends, and I do hope you're all keeping well. Welcome to this new video, which is Back to Basics Part 13. Can you believe we're on Part 13 already? Well, this one's about transitioning to airliners. Like the 146 you can see here. Beautiful looking airliner. Anyway, perhaps you've been following my Back to Basics series, which has been mainly concentrating upon light aircraft or smaller aircraft like the Cessna 172 Grand Caravan, that type of thing, and you want a bit more of a challenge. You've heard a lot of hype about excellent payware airliners releasing recently: Concorde, 146, 737, the Phoenix A320, and you want to get on board with it. But then you load in an airliner, and you think, my goodness me, there's so many buttons, so many controls, where do I start? Particularly if you've not flown airliners before. Well, in this video, I'm going to help you transition into, hopefully, flying airliners so you can join us in the skies. Things you should first look out for when jumping into an airliner. Things you should be learning about it. All done in a very much back to basics kind of way. Okay, so let's not dilly-dally. Let's get on with this video. So when you first load into your first airliner, you take a look around. Probably been a blind panic thinking, what on earth do I do here? First thing you should do, with any aircraft in fact, but especially airliners, look at your primary flight displays. They should be right in front of your seat. These displays here, pretty much the same position or area in all airliners and pretty much all aircraft. Zoom into them. You want to find out where things like your altitude indicator is, which is here in the 146. Actually, there's a couple of them. This one just shows more accurately tens of feet, hundreds of feet, and thousands of feet. So altitude indicator, your airspeed indicator. In the 146, it's a dial. So it's an analog dial. So there you go, as you can see. Take a look at it. Read the manual, watch videos to see, what these different speeds are. But even without reading the manual or watching the videos, just look at it. Obviously, like with all aircraft, you want to avoid getting into this area of speed. You'll be overspeeding. This one here looks like it's going to be takeoff speed, for example. And maybe cruise speed down here. So take a look at it and learn your airspeed indicator as well. And thankfully it gives you a digital readout in the 146. Each aircraft's going to be different. In the A320, for example, you'll have a glass cockpit like you would in the Cessna 172. Obviously very different in the A320, but it'll give you all digital readout of your altitude, your speed, your airspeed, and your heading and that type of thing. But just find out where they are. So altitude indicator, airspeed, the compass to show you where you're heading, what direction you're heading. We're on runway 27, so we're heading 270 degrees on the compass, as we are here. Vertical speed indicator or deflector. So there you go. If we're descending, this arrow will be pointing down in this direction. If we're climbing, it will be pointing up in this direction. Find out where they are. So altitude, airspeed, and compass. That should be your first priority when first loading into an airliner. You've also got your artificial horizon here. Pretty much all airliners will have something like this. Just shows you at a glance whether you're heading towards the ground or heading up towards the sky, whether you're climbing or descending. Another thing you can do, I'll talk more about this sort of quick views later, but just get to your center panel here. pretty much all airliners will have a similar thing. Just take a quick glance at it to begin with. You've got your autopilot master here. Going to be slightly different in this aircraft, in airliners, to something like the Cessna 172, but you've still got your altitude hold there. Heading hold, vertical speed. They act differently here, like I said, in airliners than in something like the Grand Caravan or Cessna 172. But take a quick look at it. Here we've got our altitude, our autopilot assigned altitude. So if I move this and assign my autopilot to 10,000 feet, for example, that's how you would do it there. And it will be different with each airliner. Whichever airliner you want to fly, take a look at it to begin with. But don't go into too much detail with that yet. Another thing you should be doing is coming down, move your view down, to take a look at your throttle. In this case, we've got 4 throttles. I'm using the Xbox controller even at the moment, just because I've got my laptop with me and I'm in a different location, so I'm just using my Xbox controller. But if I increase my throttle on my Xbox controllers, I've got them bound to all 4 throttles. Decrease will decrease it. The flaps beside it, if I move my flaps button on my Xbox controller, you can see it will move my flaps up or down. Just get a look. You've even got an air brake here, and that'll be spoiler. I think on my keyboard, on your keyboard generally, I think that's a / by default. Actually, let's just get outside. I can show you that in action. So if I press the / there you go. It'll deploy the air brakes. Not going to worry too much about that. I'm just getting familiar with the throttle system here. And let me just show you. To bind all 4 controls, that will just simply be on the power management. So let's just see. Xbox controller there. As you can see, I've got my Xbox 360. It's not the Xbox One controller, but never mind. Power management, throttle, increase throttle, simply increase throttle and decrease throttle. It will bind to all 4 throttles. Depending what airliner you're flying, you may only have 2 throttles. But just simply increase and decrease throttle will bind all the throttles to one button. So that's that. Just get familiar, mainly with your primary flight controls and your throttle setup in whatever aircraft you're flying. And I'll tell you what I'm going to do there is just get my yoke reattached. Once you've found out, and once you're familiar, especially with your primary flight controls, first thing I would suggest, release your parking brake and go for a quick fly. Get a feel for the aircraft before learning about the autopilot and goodness knows what. Just get a feel for it. How does it feel to taxi? I'm just taxiing along, it feels lovely. Especially the 146. I'll just get, so you can see my speed in a digital readout here, I'll get to about 140. I'm at London City Airport, so it's not the ideal runway to take off from, but we should be able to manage. I pushed back quite a bit. 130, 140, oh, you know what, that'll do. Remember, airliners, oh, let's get a bit higher. Oh. See, I'm getting used to it with the Xbox controller. You're going to have to forgive me there. Not flown this with the Xbox controller before. I'll just trim up a little bit. But I'm just getting a feel for the aircraft. Not the best takeoff. Doesn't matter. Might be the same as your takeoff. I'll keep that in the video. Might be exactly the same. I'm just trimming up to make sure that I'm not going to crash into buildings there. And what I'll do is fly around a bit. Take a look around when I'm flying around. I'll just alter my view a little bit so I can see my airspeed there down below. There we go. That will do. I'll just throttle back a bit because I don't want to overspeed. I'm not deploying any autopilot yet. I'm just flying around. The 146 feels lovely in flight. Just got to be aware that I am using an Xbox 360 controller, so I'm just going to be a bit gentler on the flight controls on my left analog stick. That's okay, I'm just getting a feel for it. So those are the first steps. Find out, like I said, where your airspeed indicator is, your altitude indicator, Even vertical speed, you can see we're climbing at the moment because that indicators pointing upwards. It's about to point downwards. That's okay, I'll just trim up and try and keep us in some kind of level flight, which is okay there. I can see where my compass is, so I can see where I'm heading. And I'm just getting a feel for the aircraft. Okay, once you've learned that, it's time to go on to the next step. And so, onwards and upwards. Just beware, these next steps are going to become more advanced as we go along. There's no other way if you're going to fly an airliner. But I'm going to try and go through them lightly with you and gently. Just to recap there, we've learned where our primary flight displays are, airspeed, altitude, heading, and we took it up for a quick test flight. We've learned how many throttles we have, and we've bound them to one key. If you're using 4 different throttles on your flight controller, you can do that as well. Flaps and air brake, all that good stuff. Next step, something I fully endorse, set up some custom views. I've got some custom views set up. I'm going to link the video I did about noobifying, how to set up custom views in a noobified way. So a newbie guide to setting up custom views, that's a better way of saying it. And basically there, I showed you. Let's get back to my default view. Using your cursor keys on your keyboard, you can move around the aircraft, zoom in and out, and then you can save these as custom views. Go and watch that video to see how I did that. I've got some set up. I've got one set up here for my autopilot master. That's where this lives in the 146, strangely enough. For the FMS, I'm going to come back to this. This is very important to learn. Overhead view, another overhead view, and center view of my center control buttons here. And one for the tablet because I'm flying the 146. So all various different kind of views there that I've got set up. Fully endorse you do that. Some aircraft may come with default views. I'm pressing my left control and numbers 1 to 0 here. And it's going through all the different views. You could try that in an aircraft. It may have some default views. But then again, I fully endorse and fully recommend setting up your own custom views. I know what buttons are set to what on my controller and keyboard for all these views, so I can get to them quickly. I mean, if I need to get down to my autopilot master, I know where that is. If I need to go to my tablet, I know where that is. If I need to go to my overhead panel, I know where that is. So have them set up, fully recommend that. Let's now go back down to the FMS. Like I said, see, press the button, I knew exactly what button that was set to. No easy way of getting around this, you've got to learn this. Best way to do it is to watch videos, other YouTube videos on your specific airliner. This is the 146. Or even reading the manual. If you've got an airliner on the Xbox, you can go on a PC and just download the manual and review it. Fully recommend you do that and get familiar with your flight management system, your little computer next to the pilot here, or CDU, I believe, in the A320. As you can see, I've got a flight loaded in here already, and I've not entered it via this keyboard. I'm going to overlay a video on top of this one. You can see I'm on the world map. Simple flight, London City to Dublin. I went to the top left there and just chose IFR Low Altitude Airways. And it gave me a makeshift flight plan. An IFR instrument flight plan. Basically a flight plan that you would use in airliners. Not real world, it just gave me a makeshift one from the world map. Let's get that off screen now. So when I loaded in on this flight, the flight plan was already entered for me. I fully recommend you do that. I'm going to link another video in the top right about my Concorde tutorial. I flew a flight fully created on the world map in the Concorde, and I flew that flight route. Fully recommend you do that first, but when you do get in your aircraft, press your previous and next buttons. Pretty much similar in many airliners, they all have these kind of buttons. And go to your legs page and just zip through your flight plan to see where it's taking you. See how many miles between each waypoint. It'll be slightly different for each airliner. but learn to do it. Like I said, watch videos, read the manual. I'm also going to link in the top right, I think it was Back to Basics 11. I showed you, at least in the 146, and it's similar in other aircraft, how to enter your route manually. You do that by using the keyboard. So I could type in, for example, I think it's Honnelly in the UK, H-O-N. It's already in there already, in fact, but I'm going to insert it again, just let's say here. So I've typed it in using the keypad here. You can see letters have come up down here. That's what I've just typed. And I can press one of these buttons to insert it into the flight plan here. In this case, Honnelly, it'll give you different options because there's different ones around the world. I know the EG one is the UK one. So I press that. It's in my flight plan again. It's in twice now, in fact. I don't want it in twice. I know how to manipulate this. I know how to clear it. Press the clear button. I can clear it simply because I've learnt to use the FMS in the 146. Didn't take me long to learn, just by watching a couple of videos and reading the manual. But I fully recommend loading in, like I showed you before, a flight plan on the world map using IFR low or high altitude airways, depending where you're flying. Load into your aircraft for your first go and it will be there for you, ready to go. Only thing that's not here, and I know how to do this, don't worry about this, but for example, I know I'm taking off from runway 27. I know the top one's a good departure SID, basically a standard departure. And I can pop that in. It will now, in my flight plan, add the legs for that SID to my flight plan. Later on, I'll put in a star. Go and watch that Concorde tutorial, for example. I used the star and I inserted it into my flight plan in the Concorde from using the flight plan from the world map. Not too difficult to do, and if you do that from the world map, at least you'll have a flight plan up and ready to go. But learn how to use this flight management system, or CDU, depending what aircraft you're flying. Learn it. Next thing you should learn, let's go to our central displays or buttons here. Pretty much in all airliners that I've flown in, all the autopilot buttons will be on this central display unit here. Your altitude select, height, for example, what you want your autopilot to climb to. Let's move that to 30,000 feet. I know how to do that in this aircraft. It'll be slightly different depending on what aircraft you're flying. With my autopilot, it's very different in the 146 to other airliners. I've got a button set up on my Xbox controller, so I don't need to go down below to turn my autopilot master on. I know that engaging LNAV in this case, in this aircraft, will follow my flight route. It will be different. I'll show you this. I'll show you an example later of how I can use the autopilot in this aircraft. You'll have to transfer that to your aircraft, watch videos on it. Or read the manual, don't forget that part. With my heading select, typically in something like the A320, if you move that button dial there, you'll have a display above it. In this case it doesn't, it shows you next to it. My autopilot heading is 44 degrees at the moment. I can move that round. As I'm moving that, if I look down at my compass, I can see a little arrow here. As I move that knob with my mouse wheel, I can see that little arrow moving. So let's get that to my runway heading of 270 degrees. That would be about 271 because runway headings are never exact. There you go, I've got it synced to my runway heading. Learn how to use that. How to turn on your autopilot, your flight directors, and goodness knows what. Just learn how to use the autopilot, basically first. How to get your altitude select, what you want your aircraft to climb to. How to turn on your autopilot, how to put it into nav mode, essentially, LNAV. Vertical speed, altitude, whatever. Learn how to use the autopilot, that would be the next step. Let's get it back to reset cockpit. So I've gone through quite a bit there. How to use your, oops, let's take that air brake down. How to use, let's use my quick view button in fact, your FMS. Loading a flight from the world map, that's what I would advise first. Then fly that route. But you've got to first learn how to use your autopilot, what these do. It's not going to be easy, there's no quick way to do it. But learn it, it doesn't take too long. And once you've learned all that, we can go to the next step. Okay, so on to the next step of transitioning to Airliners with Microsoft Flight Simulator. And that's putting our newfound knowledge to the test so we know where our primary flight displays are. Airspeed indicator, altitude, heading. You've taken it out for a quick test flight. Hopefully you've learned a little bit from watching videos and reading the manual about the FMS. But we've got a flight route from the world map inputted into our FMS. We go to our center panel here. We've learnt where the autopilot controls are, buttons are, and what they do. I've got an autopilot select of 30,000 feet. That's where I want my autopilot to climb to. So I'm just going to give you a quick demonstration in the 146. It's not feasible for me to show you this in every airliner. I don't own them all anyway. I don't own the 737 or Phoenix A320. So I can't show you them at the moment. I'll probably get them as time goes along. But I'm just showing you this. I'm just showing you what we've just talked about and putting those skills to the actual test. A physical demonstration of them. Not gone over much about the overhead panel here. Here you'll find your landing lights. Things like beacon lights. Also, controls and buttons on starting the aircraft up. I wouldn't go straight in and want to start the aircraft up from cold and dark. I usually fly it around first, fly a course, then I come back and learn how to start it up from cold and dark and how to shut it down. Don't be too concerned about that yet, or the overhead panel. We might go back up there to turn the landing lights off later. Well, let's take this up for a quick test flight. Keep in mind I am using the Xbox controller. So I'll release the parking brake. Go full throttle. There you go, I can hear my engines engaged into full throttle there. Just zoom in my view a bit because I am on a laptop. So I've got to see what my current airspeed is, or ground speed is. Get that speed to around 140-ish, then I'll pull back and take off. Try and do it a little bit smoother. It's a short runway, runway 27. Should give you hope that I'm using an Xbox controller here, able to do this with an Xbox controller. Effectively. Nope. It is very, very sensitive still, the Xbox controller, especially for airliners. Just about manage it though. Let's just trim up a little bit there and get this aircraft under control somewhat. There we go. Trim up a little bit more, otherwise you'll be crashing, dear boy. There we go. I'm going to head towards the centre of London there, so I'm just using my trim buttons on my Xbox controller to trim up there. Still just about doable. Just missing those buildings, that's fine. And let's do some autopilot shenanigans. So let's click the autopilot master on. Going to come to my center control display unit there and click altitude select. That's how you do it in the 146, so it'll keep climbing until we get to 30,000 feet. I'll just come back down. Just keep an eye on my throttle there. Now my vertical speed is quite high. Just giving you an example here. I don't want it so high, climbing so vigorously. Although my throttle is about where I want it. It's 270, like it around 250-ish. So I'm going to alter that vertical speed. I'm just going to trim down slightly. There we go. And I can, once I've got it where I want the vertical speed to be, I'll click on my vertical speed button. That's a little bit better. Okay, I want it to follow my flight route. With the 146 it's slightly different. You have to click this button down here. Come on. Better. And click to LNAV. And that will now follow the route I've got set up in the FMS, which I did on the world map. Quick look outside, you can see it's turning under autopilot to follow the route. Get back into the aircraft, back down to that FMS. So it's on following the next leg of this route. Going through this fairly quickly, you have to get it aligned to your route. You can see how many miles we got to our next leg here. You can see our speed is quite quick, so I want to slow that down. I'm just decreasing throttle, get that down to below 300. It's coming down now, which is good. And it's following the next leg of the route. We'll just let that settle down a bit, make sure things are behaving. We are climbing. What are we passing? 7,000, 8,000 feet at the moment. Just showing you this purely as an example. So I'm climbing up to the autopilot selected altitude that I set before. It may be different in different aircraft. I've got it set to LNAV, and it's following our flight plan effectively. I've got it in vertical speed mode to stay on that vertical speed climb, which seems to be doing okay. I'll just keep monitoring the airspeed there. Don't want to go below 250. So just increase the throttle a bit there. May have to alter the vertical speed as well. So I can click off vertical speed mode and trim down a bit. Just so our aircraft can gain a little bit more speed. There you go. That vertical speed will do. Just over 1,000 feet per minute, I believe. And throttle back a little bit more now because the aircraft's speeding up. Keep it around that speed. There you go. It's settling down. And we're on to the next leg of our flight route. So it's going to follow our flight route, take us right into Dublin. Not going to do the full flight. That was just a quick demonstration of what I've learned. I'm still very much learning this 146. Take what you've seen in this video and adapt it to your airliner. Learn about the primary flight displays, the FMS central display unit panel here, and your autopilot and goodness knows what. And join us in the airliner skies. Well, listen, I hope this has been of help. And if you're very new to airliners, at least I hope it's going to help you. Let me know your thoughts down below. Give the video a like if you've liked it. Subscribe for more, many more flight simulator videos on their way. And I'll see you soon.